All right. So tonight we're going to talk about how to incorporate a plant-based diet to promote our overall health and longevity. Next slide. So I already kind of talked about myself. Like I said, I'm a registered dietitian. I own a private practice called Heal Thyself Nutrition, where I focus on helping people heal from chronic diseases. This is where you can find me and hang out with me online. That's my website, my Instagram handle, and my Facebook page. Next slide, and we'll get right into it. So today we're just going to talk about what a plant-based diet is and why going plant-based is really hot and trendy right now. We'll talk a little bit about what our current diet looks like and why a plant-based diet provides some different health benefits that we might not be getting from what we're currently eating. We'll talk a couple challenges that come with eating plant-based and how to overcome those, and then how to incorporate it, how to take it home and start doing it tomorrow. Next slide. So I love this quote, and people always ask me, what should I be eating? What diet should I be following? How do you eat? And I love the simplicity of this quote. And it just says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And it kind of just covers all the bases, right? We don't ever want to be overeating or in this calorie surplus that we talk about, and that most of our diet should be from plant based sources. Next slide. So, what is plant based eating? So, by definition, it's a form of eating that focuses on plant based foods, right? So, these are our whole grains, our beans, our legumes, our nuts and seeds, our fruits and vegetables. There's no processing, there's not much processing with plant based foods. These are the foods that I always say, like, we're here before us, they're going to be here after us. And by definition, a plant based diet is one that is low with animal food products. Next slide. So a plant-based diet is high in all of those foods, like I was saying, which provides a lot of fiber, a lot of vitamins and minerals, some good healthy fats, and phytochemicals. So, right, all the color that comes with our fruits and vegetables, they provide all these nutrients for our cells, and they fall on the lower glycemic end when we think about carbohydrates, which is shown to have a longer health and longevity for people. So, plant-based diet is low in saturated fats, cholesterol, sodium, toxins, and these things called glycated end products that are formed when we cook or cure or process meats. So it's low in those things. So that's why we'll talk about in a few how beneficial it can be to our health. Next slide. So as we were saying, like the plant-based movement is growing. So it's exciting that people are kind of becoming more educated, becoming more in control of what they want to ask for from our food makers, from our farmers, and things like that. And they're realizing that a plant based style of eating is ultimately healthier for the long term. People are doing these things called meatless Mondays. We see that everywhere on Instagram. They're even incorporating it in school programs and school lunches on college campuses. So that's cool that it's kind of, happening on a bigger scale. Of course, there's a lot of celebrity promotion, which helps it grow. And then there's websites, blogs, and diets specifically focused on plant based eating. Next slide. So, where does the science kind of land with eating way? So, they say that a vegetarian style, so, lots of fruits, vegetables, plants, has been shown to improve health outcomes in lowering obesity, cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, and just total overall mortality. So, lowering the death risk. Studies are showing that there's less inflammation with a diet like this, that we have a better immune response. So, our immune system is stronger, that our gut is healthier. It's getting a lot more diverse probiotic, prebiotic foods that it likes, which again is going to help our immune system if we know that our immune system is housed right in our bellies, in our gut. There's a lot of brain protection, again, that does stem from all of the nutrients, prebiotic foods that we're giving our guts. We have that direct correlation with the gut and the brain. And a plant based diet has been shown in studies to prevent, treat, and reverse some of the most chronic diseases, like you can see here. So, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, arthritis, etc., even some cancer. Next slide. So this is kind of where we stand right now as the typical American diet. We actually call it the standard American diet or the SAD diet. So plant food sources take up about 12%, as you can see here, where most of our diet is from these processed foods, right? There's a lot of added sugars and fats and oils, a lot of refining of our grains, so the reprocessing of certain grains. And I teach a class on reading labels and kind of picking out where these foods come into play a lot in our diet. And I think you'd be surprised how often and in the big amounts that they are in the foods that we consume every day. This is pretty much what the standard diet of an American looks like. And you can see in the corner that a quarter of it comes from animal foods. And again, only 12% from plant foods. Next one. So, what we know in the science from this standard American diet is that now it's the number one risk factor for the leading causes of death and disability, that we can directly correlate diet to these things. We know that 50% of adults have a chronic illness, and that 86% of our healthcare dollars are going to pay for diseases that are ultimately preventable. Things that, if we were to change the way we were eating, would not be there in the first place. We know that 65% of our adults are overweight or obese. Next slide. We know that 20% of our children from like 6 to 19 are obese, and those statistics have tripled since the 70s. So only a couple of decades. That's a kind of a big jump. There's also an increased incidence of hypertension and diabetes in children, which is terrifying to me. And then we're also seeing really early signs of atherosclerosis. So that's like the hardening of blood vessels in children. Again, based off of the standard diet, like you saw on that chart, what they're eating. And the most terrifying one to me is that now it's 1 in 69 children develops autism, which is up 15% over just the past 2 years. So that's like a increasingly steadily climbing statistic that we should kind of be paying a little more attention to. Next one. So us millennials, right, the age of the millennial, we're shaking up the food industry. Like I said at the beginning, we're asking for more things. We're becoming more educated, more knowledgeable about what's in our food. And we're kind of fighting back and not buying the crappier options. So 70% of the population has reported reducing their meat consumption or completely taking meat off of the table altogether, based on the statistic I was showing you before about where we currently are in our healthcare related to our diet, and also the benefits of incorporating more of a plant-based meal. Um, the shift towards plant-based foods is being driven by millennials, Forbes said, who consider a multitude of things. So not only the source of the food, the animals and their welfare, but also environmental ramifications that come from the overproduction of meat and the meat industry. Next slide. So they predicted that we could save up to 8 million lives per year if there was a global reduction in meat consumption from 2016 up until 2050. That we could save a lot of healthcare dollars, about $31 trillion, and that could really put a big dent in the entire economy, just switching over to a more plant-based style of eating. Again, not to say that we're never eating meat again, but just changing how our plate looks. And we'll show you what a good one looks like in a few. Next one. So again, studies are showing that a diet rich in whole plant foods, like we were talking about, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, even some red wine in moderation, olive oil, decreases levels of inflammation, oxidative stress. Those are the things that bring us to those chronic diseases that we were talking about. Next one. So this is basically what it looks like. To eat a little more plant-based would be to incorporate a lot of these things. And to me, it just looks a lot like color, right? Adding some simple colorful foods to your diet, some healthy fats you see over there, whole grains, not so much the refined white stuff, I call it. Next one. So again, yeah, basically we're just going to include more legumes, so beans, lentils, peas, things like that. whole soy foods, which we'll get into for the rest of this series. So tofu, tempeh, soy milks, nuts, and nut butters. So using those as good protein sources and just having those for snacks and adding them to your salads and to your plates. Same with the seeds and seed butters. Switching over again from refined white grain to whole grains. So um, brown stuff, the more multi-grain oats, brown rice, buckwheat. And then, of course, more color in fruits and vegetables. Next one. So some common concerns when people transition over to less meat intake and more plant-based sources are, will I get enough protein? So the plant sources, like things we're talking about, the legumes, the nuts, the seeds, they definitely have great protein packages that meat doesn't provide because they also come with fiber, with micronutrients, with those phytochemicals again. And they provide about 9 grams of protein per serving. So you're going to want to pair them with some other sources on the plate, like a soy, quinoa, chia, hemp seeds, which are complete proteins. We know that whole grains provide 6 grams of protein per half cup. Vegetables provide about 3 grams per half cup. So in that sense, it's going to be more about the volume of the foods in order to meet your protein needs there. Next slide. Another common concern with transitioning away from a huge diet, what would we say, like, what was it, 65% or so of, no, 25% animal products, right? Switching over from that to more plant-based foods is, do I get enough B12? So B12 is the vitamin that's available only from animal products. So they start putting it back into some fortified foods. So you could get it from there. But for the most part, if you're following a pretty dominant plant-based vegetarian or vegan diet, you're going to want to think about a B12 supplement because, again, you're not going to get it enough from those plant-based sources. So I always will recommend a quality B12 supplement. It would be dose dependent on the person, their age, what they're kind of dealing with. But I always recommend that a vegan takes a B12 supplement every day because they will definitely not ever get any of it because they're not, they're completely avoiding animal products. Next one. So some challenges for plant-based eating and starting to transition over are sometimes the lack of knowledge of how to cook some of the foods. I remember like looking at a bag of beans and being like, what do I do with this? Like, how do these work? Putting them into too much water and not enough water and, who knows what. So there's a little learning curve there. There's a learning curve with these foods that we're unfamiliar with, right? The tofu and tempeh and things like that I'm so excited to learn about tomorrow and part of this series. And I think that's why it's such a cool blend of topics because this is where the challenge comes. They're like, okay, but I don't really know how to make this kind of stuff because there is a little more preparation and thought to be put into it in order to, again, make sure you're getting enough of each, macronutrient, but also getting enough food in for your day. Next slide. So how can we start? Like, how can tomorrow we start to incorporate some more plants into our diet? And everyone laughs when I call it, like, it's funny that we call it plant-based diet. Of course, it's what they are. Everyone's like, I'm not just going to start eating plants out of the ground. Silly. But all we could do is add some veggies to our breakfast plate, right? We live in this standard American diet where breakfast has to look like pancakes and bacon and home fries and biscuits, right? That's the typical American diet. So if we added a couple of veggies, sauteed some veggies up in the morning and cracked an egg over it, like that is awesome. That's a great idea. We could try to do the meatless Mondays or participate in places that do that, or make it a fun thing in your household to think of a fun recipe you could make on Mondays to try to do a meatless Monday. But basically, like the rule of thumb is to have half of your plate be plant sources, right? So when you're building your breakfast, lunch, dinner plates, half of the plate is fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and then we're using meat or meat products, chicken, fish, anything like that, as a condiment, as like a side to it, and not the main event, right? When we build a plate, we're building it around those animal protein sources. So we plop the big piece of steak down and then kind of place a couple veggies, couple, pieces of broccoli around it. Let's switch how we look at things like that and do half of our plate veggies and then meat as the condiment. We can start by tuning into this fun series and learning how to incorporate more cultural foods because they're the ones that kind of are way ahead of us Americans, right? They definitely have the whole plant-based thing down. That's just part of their culture. So I'm excited tomorrow to learn about some Japanese styles of cooking that we can easily incorporate at home, which again is going to incorporate all of the foods we just talked about tonight. And then there's some cool swaps that you can make with, again, thinking about the things that are simple to swap out. So our refined white stuff, our pastas and breads and things like that. Can we try a quinoa based pasta, zucchini or butternut squash noodles? Can we try a whole grain bread, Ezekiel breads, buckwheat, different styles of grains to replace some of those things? Next slide. So basically, I just want you to think about what and how often you consume animal products, specifically red meat or pork. Like, how many times do those come up in your day, in your week, in your month? And where could you tweak things a little bit? Where could you swap them out? Where could you reduce the portion of them and add something else? Add another plant based source of protein, some quinoa, a soy product, things like that, or something colorful. Make half of that plate, fruits and vegetables and a lot of color. So think about that next time you eat and pick one of your meals, what it could look like where you could maximize that for yourselves. Next one. So, what I have for you is a way to get started tomorrow or today, depending on what time it is for you. If you're about to head to the grocery store, you can download this plant based grocery list that I've made for you and bring it to the store with you and just buy from the list and then figure out how you can. Tomorrow will be helpful in learning how to build them into actual meals. But I think the first step is having the stuff in your house, right? So we gave you a lot of things to pick up for your pantries and for your fridges, for your homes from this plant based grocery list. And that is all for my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so if you're just tuning in, we just finished our little
You're
slide
welcome.
deck,
That's fun.
and Amanda put together a shopping list for you if you want to try going plant-based. These are the foods that you want to look for at the supermarket. It's a downloadable PDF that she put together, and I'll put it in the chat right now for you. Go ahead and get it. And if you guys have any questions, yeah, ask right now. I know that some of you have asked questions ahead of time, and we'll go ahead and get to some of those now. So, Amanda, first question for you is going to be, can plant-based foods be gluten-free?
Yes. So by default, a lot of plant-based foods are gluten-free, which everyone, it's so funny. I deal with a lot of gluten-free patients, right? And before they get to that point, they're like, "Are you going to take gluten away from me?" And it is the most like terrifying feeling for them. And I wonder what is the actual product that they're holding on to so much, and they're surprised at how much more they can eat that again naturally doesn't have gluten in it. So of course, all the sources of gluten-free things are plant-based options. So it's becoming plant-based, you kind of automatically become gluten-free, which helps so
Okay,
many other
good to
things at the
know.
same time. So
And
it's an
the
overall
second
win.
question that I got was, what is the difference between plant-based
Yeah.
and vegetarianism and veganism?
Mm. So plant-based is pretty much the diet or the title that I would probably emphasize with the most. People are like, "What diet do you follow?" Right? You're the dietitian, and I never want to feel like I'm restricting myself or cutting any one thing out fully. So plant based is one that allows for some animal products. It's just again, like we talked about, not the main event. So vegetarians will not consume animal products typically. They have, lacto ovo vegetarians that allow some eggs and things like that, or pescatarians allow fish, but vegetarians don't eat any animal products, and then vegans eat nothing that could possibly come from an animal. So that brings things like honey, and some other things that get a little, what else I don't know. It's a stricter one because they don't allow any possible animal thing in there. So it's very heavily, I mean, only plant-based. But
Okay.
a plant-based diet allows for a little more
Sounds very good.
flexibility
I'm all about
if that's what you're
flexibility
going
myself.
for.
I'm
So
sure.
you're allowed to have some things. Yeah. Right. Me too. That's the one, like I said, I could like resonate with the most because I didn't want to, put a label on myself in that sense. So I love plant-based, and then I like incorporating plant-based. It kind of takes the pressure off of it because you're allowed to have that wiggle room and, you know, kind of have a little more freedom. If you go to a party and there's only
Okay.
XYZ option, like you
So
don't have to
another
feel like you
question
can't
that I
have
got,
foods.
as a
So it definitely allows
nutritionist
for
or
that
dietitian,
flexibility.
how did you get into plant-based food?
Hmm. Yeah. I think the science is really, I mean, so we're science-based practitioners, and I think it's just irrefutable the difference. Like we kind of showed you the stats of our current healthcare situation and all of the things that incorporating a more plant-based diet can help fix. So that for me was such an easy thing to not get on board with, but just really dive deeper into and figure out how to make it manageable and doable for my patients so that we could eliminate those diseases that they were dealing with. And then once you see that work, I
Right.
mean, you're
Very
sold,
cool.
right?
Okay.
As a practitioner, at
Um,
least.
yeah. So
Yeah.
tomorrow, and the last
So
day,
what are we
tomorrow we're
talking
going to be
about
actually talking
tomorrow?
about Japanese specifically, and if Japanese food can be plant-based. Plant-based isn't really a Japanese term, American term, I think. There isn't really a Japanese word for it. I have a word for vegetarianism, but
Yes.
and that's something that we'll be talking about on Thursday, April 4th. It's going to be at 6 o'clock. So if you are interested in that topic, make sure you
I
and
know I'm kidding. Not
the alarm
tomorrow,
bell on the
yes.
link and the chat so that you get the notification or reminder we're going to be going live. And on Friday, we're actually going to be going a little bit more in detail on a couple topics that some people have asked. That's going to be soybeans, soy products, tofu, tempeh, all of those different soy products, as well as fermented food. So both of those things are actually pretty significant in Japanese
Hmm.
diet, which you may or may not know.
Yeah.
That's going to be our topic for Friday. So if
And they're also significant in the nutrition world. People are like, can I eat this? Is this going to kill me? Is this good for me? Am I supposed to eat this? So
yeah,
I'm
so let me
excited to
just show you
blend both
guys the
worlds and kind of set the record
that we
straight
put
for once
together. So
and for
for
all.
the next 2 days, this is what we're about. It's going to be Thursday and Friday, 6 o'clock Pacific time, same place on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to join, make sure to visit uh, this channel again, and we hope to see you later this week. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on the comment section below this video or on the next two videos for later this week. Appreciate you guys joining. I think other than that, I guess both of us will see you in our next video. So again, all right, see you later.
Yay! See you guys then.